Hello, I am presenting from Japan. My name is Tetsuya Shiroishi from Yamagata University. It is pleasure to meet you. In this presentation, I will report on a food restoration experiment based on use marks studied in this study of pottery. First, an outline. This article, we will estimate the cooking of Yayoi pottery from an archaeological point of view based on the use of trace of the pottery. Then, we will practice seeing if the estimation is correct based on the experiment of pottery cooking based on used traces. Today's content is as follows. First, Yayoi period in Japan. Second, purpose of this study. Third, trace of pottery cooking. Fourth, risk contraction of pottery production. Fifth, experiment with pottery cooking. Finish, summary and future issue. Discuss the purpose of this study. In this study, we examine a cooking method of the Yayoi period. This study examines how pottery was used for cooking using reconstructed Japanese pottery from the Yayoi period. Since we may need to become more familiar with it, we will briefly introduce the Yayoi period in Japan, the period analyzed in this study. The Yayoi period corresponds to the Neolithic. In the Yayoi period, the continent introduced rice farming culture to Japan. In the Yayoi, rice farming culture spread to the Japanese archipelago. As a result, in addition to hunting, gathering, and fishing that had continued since the Jomon period, food production activities based on paddy rice cultivation began. Then, change occurred in the food environment, and we know that during the Yayoi period, life was based on rice farming. In other words, the food culture changed to one centered on rice. This shape of pottery for boiling and cooking changed between the Jomon and Yayoi period. Jomon pottery has a long body, while Yayoi pottery Yayoi pottery has a rounded shape. This changed the way the fire in received placed of salt and stirred can be used to reconstruct how it was used for cooking. Let us look at this in detail. The section describes the reconstruction of cooking methods based on pottery use marks. First, let us talk about the pattern of pottery use marks. The subject pottery consists of about 50 pieces at the Ikego site in Japan. This site is where the same pottery as the reconstructed pottery has been excavated. The material was characterized by the large amount of salt on the other surface of the pottery. Therefore, it is not easy to see traces of use on outside. We report what we have been able to confirm. The inner surface of the pottery shows a circular band area on the bottom. A band of bone is circulating on the inner surface side. From these results, it can be assumed that boiling food. This is a diagram conceptualized from pottery use marks. It is stunning. First, it is starting, receiving fire, and then lying on down. Here, the hot water is being dropped. Third and fourth, finally, the vessel is finished by steaming the side and the pot not exposed to fire. Thus, the cooking method of the Yayoi pottery can be reconstructed from how it is salted and charred. We will cook in the same way in the experiment. In order to cook with pottery, it is also essential to restore it. I want to mention here the production of reconstructed pottery used for cooking. The pottery restoration was done with the member of the Jomon Pottery Club of the Yokohama Museum of History, to which co-presenter Hashiguchi belonged. This time, pottery for cooking was restored. The potter shows the work in progress. Notes that the clay used to make the pottery is produced in the region similar to the clay used to analyze the pottery. The pottery produced will be fired. The Yokohama Museum of History is an urban area with many private houses, so care must be taken to prevent the fire from spreading. For this reason, a concrete blocks are used on all sides. Pottery firing is covered with straw. This is called cover firing. After covered it with straw, it is hardened with clay. In this way, the fire temperature is raised, and the left side is immediately after hardening on the right. The clay is period of after firing. This is the finished product. You can see black spots and places. Be careful because it is skewering immediately after baking. Now that pottery is complete, we would like to start experimenting with cooking with it. Let us tell you under what conditions we proceeded with the cooking experiment. First, we prepare the rice, millet, and fish then, combining cooking contents, we create the following conditions. 1. Rice only. 2. Millet and rice. And 3. Millet, rice, and fish. I will explain the reason for this on the next slide. Finally, from an analytical standpoint, we verify whether it is possible to cook the food similarly. This is because the used traces of pottery excavated from the site show almost the same trend, so there is not much difference in the cooking method, and it is so taught that verify a variety of foodstuff prepared in the same way. Here is a brief explanation of why the cooked foodstuff were chosen. Pottery contents can be liberated by repeat analysis of the shared material on the pottery. This slide shows the result of the analysis of the one Yayoi site. The subject sample will be the pottery we talked about before. In addition, the previously presented analytical methods were used to extract repeats from pottery, and biomarker analysis and molecular level carbon isotope composition of palmitic and stearic acids were analyzed to estimate the origin of the remaining organic materials. Figure is the result of isotope ratio analysis. Here, dots can be seen on three C3 plants and freshwater fishes. Furthermore, regarding biomarker, the myrcene detection rate is about 70%, and the TMTD detection rate is about 60%. Moreover, myrcene and TMTD are detected together in about 55% of cases. This means that at the reasonably high rate and inland Yayoi site also ate fish, and even after rice cultivation became widespread, they also ate millet. This slide shows just before the cooking process. The bottom rightmost figure is a photograph taken after the completion of the project. It can be seen that soot is circulating on the lower part of the pottery body. It is also clear that the soot was oxided and disappeared near the fire. In other words, the same trace as those of use can be confirmed. These figures show a time series of temperature change. The vertical line presents temperature, and the horizontal line represented time. You can see that rice only cooks relatively quickly. On the other hand, rice combined with the millet takes longer. In addition, the temperature of those containing fish and not risen fully. However, the pottery that contained fish broken down in the progress, which is what happened. It is not so different from millet and rice. However, rice only cook quickly, which create time for other things to be done during the cooking. Most of the charred rice excavated from archaeological site is often rice only. Cooking rice only has the advantage of shortening the cooking time, and it allows for the cooking of other occasions and the saving of firewood. Let me conclude with the conclusion of this experiment. This video shows the sequence of events during the experiment. Record the process 1 to 4 from earlier. First, set out the pottery, then pour out the hot water. Then, after steaming, it slightly laid it down. Okay, this complete process summary and future. I would like to discuss. Let me conclude with the conclusion of this experiment. As a result of this study, cooking was possible without changing the cooking method. Differences were observed in cooking time. Future verification is needed to determine if this is due to individual differences in pottery. The use marks on the reconstructed pottery were the same as those on the excavated pottery. The experiment results showed that the same cooking methods concurred reconstructed the same situation as the excavated pottery. It was also found that there were differences in cooking time depending on continent. In the future, we will aim for more accurate restoration by experimenting multiple times. This slide is acknowledgement. Thank you. Thank you for watching. If you are interested, please get in touch with us.